Guys, let's talk about changing the world some more, shall we? You may have heard of the idiom that a stitch on time saves nine. Within the figurative meaning of the word stitch, it is not always easy to see the stitch on time. And a lot of times, when we do see it, we choose to ignore it until the problem becomes unmanageable. We all have a purpose in this world, and the world is as seen through the eyes of the beholder. Who doesn't want to make this world a better place? But we can only do what we can do, starting with what we do at home and around us. Although universally speaking, change is inevitable, we don't necessarily think of changing something unless it can be made better or there is a problem with it. However, identifying the problem areas is not always easy, as the element in question may be made up of many smaller components. So to change it, the smaller components need to be changed. Enough of abstract talk, and let me move on to introducing an idea to you all in the hope that it will help us see the bigger or smaller picture in a given situation. Fractals. If you haven't heard of fractals before, Benoit Mandelbrot has been credited with discussing the idea first. Fractals can be seen almost everywhere, and it helps us to make sense of things that may otherwise look chaotic or disorderly. A fractal is primarily when a pattern repeats itself inside the same pattern, which is seen on the outside. It is also a fractal when patterns are repeated. In its latter use, it helps us to see connections between various things about the universe. So to take an example, here's a triangle. Take the same triangle and you draw a triangle inside, and you see the pattern repeats itself inside. So you see 4 triangles, which looks exactly like the triangle on the outside. Here's the same triangle again, this time with triangles drawn on the outside. So as you can see, wherever you look, you still see triangle. And you can see it in its bigger form or its smaller form. You may find that the ideas presented on fractals do not help with the discussions, but hey, not everyone uses the same tool, and not everyone uses the same tool for the same reason. Although the idea of fractals are generally used in a physical context, I'm hoping to extend the idea of repeating patterns or seeing the bigger picture, as we have seen with the triangle, to visualize how we live and do things in societies. I've always looked at things in terms of how one thing leads to another, or how many aspects of how we do things are linked, and I think fractals illustrate such connections quite well. Let's look at a mundane example to illustrate seeing the bigger picture. How many of you think of throwing bits of rubbish on the streets as negligible because you think, what's a bit of rubbish? Someone will clean it up. By the same token, how many of you think the streets are full of rubbish? Have you answered yes to both questions? The guy who throws rubbish on the streets cannot see that if everyone else around him did the same, it will not take long for the streets to look messy. Maybe one day we will have robots cleaning up immediately after us, huh? How many of you truly appreciate that what happens to someone else can happen to you? I hear so many stories of people walking by when someone is in need of help. Hopefully you're not one of them. If you ignore a crime taking place in front of you and you choose to do absolutely nothing, as it is not my problem, can you see the bigger picture of how easy it becomes for criminals to commit crime and how long it may be before your town seems like Gotham City? What happens to someone else is ultimately your problem. If your neighbor goes hungry all the time while you have plenty to eat and ignore his plight, it will eventually affect you, as they may resort to stealing from you. What I'm saying is, big problems are usually made up of lots of smaller problems, and if we do nothing, then cohesion in society crumbles, and eventually our civilization with it. So help make this world a better place by doing your bit when you see a problem. Now back to fractals. Let me leave you with a thought. Here is an atom. As you see, the proton and neutrons make up the nucleus, and you see the electrons sort of orbiting around it. Here's an image of a solar system. You see the planets orbiting around the sun. Here's an image of a black hole where you can see that a soup of galaxies are sort of spinning around it. Do you see any pattern here?